Well, welcome everyone.
Yeah.
It's been a week again. I see Tits McGee is back in school.
Oh,
Hmm.
out in Ontario.
Yeah, Kayla Lemieux. Have you
That
seen
is
that?
the school teacher with the Z-size prosthetics,
Yeah.
I believe. I've just had a request from some people for us to give a little bit of background when we're referencing some of the local events.
Okay,
So,
sure.
yeah. So just for people who aren't necessarily as, um, anyhow, just so people can understand a little bit better of what the references we're making and the events that we're talking about. So. Yeah, that was the teacher last year who made it into the news and local events, correct?
That's
Yeah,
correct. And they're
Halton.
back and they're presenting as a man, apparently.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
he left the Halton district near Toronto, and he's now teaching in Hamilton um, school board. Uh,
Okay.
so at least as far as I guess they're setting up their classrooms this week. He was dressed down.
So to speak. All right. Oh, yeah, so interesting news, kind of disappointing news coming out of Ontario with the ruling regarding the child who came home traumatized by the genderology experience she had with the Human Rights Tribunal ruling that they could see no harm done by the event.
Yeah, that was Pamela Buffoni and her daughter here in Ottawa. That event goes back like 6 years.
Oh, I didn't realize that it occurred that long ago. They dragged it
Yeah,
out that long.
it took
Wow.
until about April. It was March or April of last year when the decision finally came in from the Human Rights Tribunal. The hearings were in the early part of 2022 or late 2021. And then, of course, the tribunal takes time to make their decision and write it up and give their reasoning. But
Hmm.
the tribunal's captured, right? Like this is all the same thing with the Supreme Court at this point. They've accepted gender identity as a reality, and it can't be questioned or criticized. So
When you say as a reality, do you mean on par with sex?
yes,
Yeah, that's
yeah, yeah,
unfortunate. That's ignoring like so many other laws.
yeah, and their own. I mean, the Human Rights Tribunal in Ontario says that conflicts of rights can exist and they have to be meaningfully addressed. But in the case of gender and the trans issue, no one else's rights seem to matter.
That's disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Ken, it's nice to meet you. And you go by Kenneth at this point. Is that what's the
Yeah, Scotty and I had a bit of a discussion on that. What's my dead name today? Because Kelly is my birth name, and that's what everybody who meets me today meets me as. My legal name is still Kenneth Anderson. But socially I go by Kelly now. Yeah.
well? It's nice to meet you, Kelly.
It's good to
Uh,
meet you. And you're Douglas, right?
Shannon. Yeah.
Shannon. Okay.
I've been writing for a few years under the pen name Shannon B. Douglas. Part of that
Okay.
was, to try and fly under the radar of being outed and connecting my, kind of activist and communication and writing with my professional life. But
Right.
that's a blur now. And I'm not making any distinction, and I would find it hard to have any regulatory body that I work under. Um, I I would think it would be challenging for them at this point with things like the public opinion survey on school transitions in secret being 80% for them to say, well, we don't like what you're talking about.
That's 80% against secret transitioning of children.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you want to give us a little bit of background, how you
Sure.
came to, yeah.
Well, I'm a dad of an ROGD natal female who identifies as trans, and she came to me about 5.5 years ago, just after Easter. Maybe it's longer than that now. She was legally allowed to say, "I want to live with my mom full time." So she was 14 and said, "I can't live with you anymore. I am not safe in this house, and I can't express myself." And like it was scripted, pretty clear that it was scripted. I didn't know what the words meant at the time.
Mm,
And then not long after that, like so she cut the line like hard. Like it was a no contact you know decision that she made. It was very much out of the blue. I'm a dad unit to three other kids. And my wife who she has two bio kids from her first marriage. I have two from mine. And we really put a big emphasis on family. We had dinner, family dinner every night. We had rituals and routines, and we focused on making memories with the kids. And I recognize that no one's a perfect parent. I'm not. And at the same time, we do the very best that we can to be good parents. And then this kind of came out of seemingly nowhere. I thought that it was a continuation of an alienation tactic by her mom, like head games that her mom was playing. And then my daughter socially transitioned, or she came out online as trans, non-binary, and was going by he/they pronouns. And my daughter was love bombed. Well, okay, so Amanda Jete Knox, who you guys probably know, she wrote the book Love Lives Here. She just changed her name to something and came out as trans masculine. Wrote it up in the National Post. She's got another book coming out. So this is a kind of a stunt. Was my daughter's daycare provider.
okay.
So from the time my daughter was like 3.5, through to starting garderie, which is kindergarten in Quebec, Knox was the daycare provider for my daughter. That was before Mark came out. It was several years before Mark came out as Zoe, and transitioned. Mark is her husband, and
Okay.
I knew them both somewhat socially, but professionally.
Okay.
And then Knox love bombed my kid on Instagram and social media, and she had a huge following, and it was like the whole stunning and brave thing, and let's direct the crowd to affirm Andy. Um, and I worked hard over 9 months or a year to get the conversation going again with my daughter. Um, and I compare it to like putting milk in a dish for the kitty cat in the yard. The stray kitty cat, and you put it 50 feet from the door, and then a couple of days later you move it a little bit closer, and you move it a little bit closer. And I kind of did that with my daughter to get conversations back, but we never got. I lost my role as a dad when she was 14 because of this. I had no more real influence on her life. And then when she turned 18, that was a little over 2 years ago, graduated high school. Basically, a week later, she said, I called and said, "I want to let you know I started HRT." And I, you know, I had done some reading by this point, um, listened to Deborah So on podcasts, and read excerpts of her book, and I had a bit of a vocabulary. And then my daughter said, She just came from the hair salon, makeup, and she's sitting at my kitchen table, and I'm trying to have a conversation like any loving dad would. Say, you know what, help me understand. What is it that leads you here? And help me understand what the benefits are that you expect from this versus the risks. Because you're an adult, and I knew that if I tried to tell her anything, it was going to be a bad situation. And I already kind of knew that it might be the last conversation I had with her for a while. And after that, she cut me out of her life.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I'm speaking out about this. You know, I had to make a careful calculation. The first calculation was, what's the impact am I going to have on her health? She struggled with mental health, depression, anxiety, you know, other issues. She went through a highly contentious divorce when she was, you know, kindergarten through grade 3. And it was really, really difficult for the whole family. Certainly a less than ideal situation to have her mom put her in a custody battle and be torn between parents and all of the to be a pawn. It was really, really sad. And this is a similar story with lots of young girls. And yeah, now it's been 2 years. She, you know, for a long time I was under the radar. I was writing under a pseudonym. I wasn't public about this personally, but she figured out, and she outed me online.
Okay.
So, you know, like, so she started to threaten to dox me. Like, if you don't accept me, how would your colleagues and your clients like to know that you're a transphobe and a bigot? So I was getting these emotional blackmail kind of attacks, and then I got threats to out me as a horrible person, and then Billboard Chris came to town in October 21, and I went out with him and um, another good friend of mine here in Ottawa, Chanel Fall, who's pretty well known now for she's a canceled teacher and gone through a whole bunch of stuff in the Ontario Teachers Union and board.
Now
So,
on Billboard Chris, I've seen him on Twitter, which is now X. He's the individual I know goes around with billboards, and just so people understand exactly what we're referring to, what is it that he does?
yeah, he's a dad from Vancouver, and he originally partnered with Amy Ham, who's the nurse from Vancouver who's been under investigation for a ridiculous amount of time.
Yes.
For their team up, they put the billboard up in Vancouver. I heart J.K. Rowling,
Right.
and then Chris's story is that you know, the billboard got taken down. It was called hateful. City council condemned it. It was vandalized. You know, emergency session and all that. And so he said, well, I can't take a billboard away if I'm wearing it.
Right.
So he started to put these sandwich board signs on, and his you know, his goal is to go. He says, my goal is to have conversations with people.
Yes.
And so he's been traveling all over Canada and the States. And when he came to Ottawa, he got into a confrontation. Let's say a confrontation. A local municipal councillor who was trying to make a name for their self. Catherine McKenney. She ran for mayor of Ottawa last year, and she got on the radio and got on TV and said hate has no place here, and went off on the usual attacks, transphobia and bigotry. And Chris said, well, I'm not going to be run out of town. And I connected with him, and he said, I'm going to a place in Ottawa. There's 2 high schools and a junior high, and I'm going to go stand across the street tomorrow. Do you want to join me? So we joined him, and word got out, and we were mobbed by about 300 people.
Oh, wow.
So it was like 300 on 3. That was late October in 2021. It was like completely surreal because they were, you know, they're elbowing and shouldering and pushing us around and wrapping banners around our head. And, you know, there was some spitting, and Chanel had someone's drink poured on her, and Chris's car was vandalized, and
Can I ask you a question? What was so offensive on the billboard that caused them to do that?
Well, my billboard said gender ideology doesn't belong in schools. And Chris's says children can't consent to puberty blockers. And I forget what the other one is. No child is born in the wrong body.
All right. Okay.
And after that, I was my daughter and the local trans activists outed me. My name got out, and I said, okay, well, if that's the game, you guys have, I wasn't in the media. My face was there, but my name wasn't connected to it. But the kids outed me, and I thought to myself, okay, like you've now given me permission to go public. If you didn't want me talking about it, you wouldn't have made my name public. So
Right.
now I'm going to start speaking, and because so few other people can, like I'm lucky, my partners have said we're not going to cancel you. We support what you're doing. We may have disagreements about the nuance of what you're saying, but we're not going to fire you, and keep doing it, and we believe in your fight for your daughter. So I mean that's Ottawa is technology and government mostly, and no one in tech or government can speak. Who's not allowed. And that's the case. Up until now, things are changing, I think. So I made it a point to get out. I ran for school trustee in Ottawa last year. I ran against the only incumbent trans-identified school trustee in Canada.
Okay.
And that got my name and my interviews on CBC and CTV, and I got called all the things. But it's raised, like we've seen the needle move in such a huge way in the last year and a half. And now we're talking about September 20th, and I've said this more than once. I don't like the name Million Person March. I think it's or Million March for Kids. I think it's really overly ambitious to think that a million people might come out for protests. But we know that the support is there across the country. We know that awareness is now raised substantially. And I'm working with the organizing, at least, a good part of an organizing group around this. Blueprint for Canada, the Lighthouse Network, Our Duty Canada, parentsrights.ca, Parents Rights DOA. Like there's probably 25, 35 different groups, parents groups from various school districts are all signing on to this. And there's going to be marches and protests all across the country on September 20th about this specifically. Leave the kids alone, get gender ideology out of schools. It's no more secrets. That's the big one that's got people's imaginations right now, including the politicians. Like, why are schools keeping secrets from parents?
Oh,
Well,
they
yes.
play dumb knowing that. They know why they enabled that with the legislation that they passed.
Yeah.
But it's nice to hear them talk about it.
So the Million March for Kids is centered around speaking out about the extreme, well, I think of it as crazy as far as where the SOGI 123, where some of the teachers are taking that, and specifically the secrecy around the transitioning of children without parental consent.
Yeah, those are the big ones. This whole thing was called by a Muslim dad, and Muslims have very different views than most Canadians about LGBT and the alphabet. They're just against all of it. The Muslim scholars and imams, and there was a few hundred of them that signed a declaration, the statement of their principles, and it's very neutral. And one of the things that they say is like, we don't talk about sex. That's part of our culture. You don't. We believe that a man is a man, a woman is a woman, basically, and that's the union that God has. That's the model for the union that we're given, and that's what we follow. And we practice modesty, and we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about sexual activity. That's not our culture, and so that's their stated principles. So we expect a lot of Muslims across the country to be standing up. One of the things that broke in this probably May, or no, it was after the 1st of June, was an Edmonton school teacher was recorded berating Muslim kids in Edmonton.
Oh, wow, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, that made some pretty significant news. And then I helped to break another leak like that from June the 1st. This was from Windsor. And we got it put up at True North. And we got 1.4 million views on this. It was a 14-minute audio. Again, a teacher berating grade 6 Muslim students, calling their parents hateful, telling the kids they had to go home and educate their parents to not hate, and like it was atrocious.
Yeah.
So the Muslim community is really offended by these kinds of things, and really quite upset with. I mean, K-8 schools having big pride flag festivals, and like everyone from kindergarten through grade 8 participating in this. And the Muslims have just said no, and they keep their kids home. And
my understanding has been that children are also given no choice. Their participation is required, regardless of how they feel about the situation.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not like when what was it, straight gay alliances started back in the late 90s. They started where it was voluntary participation. Now it's required participation.
Yeah, the different schools have different policies around that, but the GSAs, you're right, used to be Gay Straight Alliance, and now they've renamed it Gender Support something association or whatever it is, and it's it's a little bit more insidious. So we're at a point. I think we're at an inflection point where public opinion has shifted quite a bit, right? And as horrible as the medicalization practices are and have been, the lack of standards, it's and the pronoun bills and all the legal stuff that we've seen, the Morgan OJs of the world, and the the radical activists like Amanda Jete Knox or who's this guy in Ottawa, big red hair. I can't remember his name offhand.
Faye Johnston.
Faye Johnston. As big as they are, and as much as the problems that they're causing are difficult, it's the kids, and it's become apparent now that to a lot more people that this is being taught in school. That there's no such thing as biological sex, that people can change their genders, and the gaslighting that the schools and the boards have been practicing to try and shut down these conversations. Parents have been going to teachers and principals and school boards for a few years about this, and they get called bigoted, and they get called transphobic, and they go by themselves, and they kind of get run out of the school. And they tried last year. It was a big increase in school board delegation. So parents and parents groups going to the school boards, trying to present to them their concerns about gender. Kellie-Lynn, the booby shop teacher, was an example of this. And then the Halton School Board started restricting access to the gallery. They cut the number of people allowed to the gallery. They called the police before all the school board meetings. They limited the number of people who could participate. The activists basically, in the internet, they call it, I think it's called a DDoS. It's a denial of service, where the old tactic to shut down a website was to send bots by the millions to crash the servers. Well, that's what the gender activists do. So when we spoke, a couple of us at the Ottawa School Board meetings, the activists got wind of it, and they brought out 300, 400 people from their local, extremist mailing list to get there 2 hours early, to occupy all the seats in the gallery, and they were intimidating anyone else who was there who wasn't wearing their rainbow colors, to try and shut
Right.
down speech.
Yes.
And some school boards have locked out parents entirely. So in Windsor, the school board has said, well, this is unsafe. So they don't even conduct their meetings in public anymore. They've said you can watch it on Zoom, but you can't participate, which is against the Education Act. And this is how far they've got. They control the school boards. We were asleep. Moderates and conservatives weren't getting people elected to those school boards, and they were taken over by leftist activists. And now they control everything, and they don't want to let anybody else in. And they made a great show of themselves over last year with all their shenanigans, and people know. And now they also know that, okay, they're not going to listen. Well, we need to send a message in a different way. So that was leading to big absences in June. So there's reports. As far as I'm concerned, they're still unconfirmed because we don't have the official data. But there was something like 30,000 reported absences on June the 1st in New Brunswick out of 90,000 students. Yeah,
and that's just people holding their children out of school.
Yeah, that's right. Just keep them home. We're going to send a message. This is not okay. We're going to support Blaine Higgs, the premier, who says you can't socially transition kids in secret. And we had some schools in Ottawa, 70% plus absence rates. We had the same things in schools in Hamilton and Waterloo and Windsor that we had reported. Schools in Calgary and Alberta or at Edmonton as well around this issue. I don't know about the same uptake in BC. The word in the spring was that it was so sensitive, like that if schools reported parents were being transphobic, like parents were concerned about child services showing up at the door.
I can see that.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from parents here in BC is that they're just quietly taking their kids out of the school and either transferring them into homeschooling or into a Christian school.
Yeah.
To get them away from SOGI 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is the SOGI is being forced into the Christian schools too, so there's really no safe haven. The indoctrination is being pushed into those corners as well. So we have
the first step of that I'm hearing about is specifically labeling fathers who object, like with European background children. Fathers who object are being labeled as narcissists.
Yeah.
He's not objecting because he loves you and cares for you as his daughter. He's objecting because he's a self-centered narcissist who has no compassion for other people.
Yeah. Anything that these people can use. So what we are dealing with actually is collective narcissism. It's a broad social disease that has captured a whole layer of society. And there's usually I've been reading this year all about mass psychosis and totalitarianism. And one of the good books I read was by Carl Jung, just a little thin, 120-page book or something, which is very unusual for Carl Jung. Yes. But it was called The Undiscovered Self. And he said that, in society, at any given time, there's a few percentage of people who have these pathological tendencies. But there are periods of history where there are some people who are kind of on the edge, and they don't act out on those sociopathic or evil behaviors. But when we get stressors in society, that small cohort of people grows, and that can influence all of society, which I think is kind of what we're dealing with now. We know that 14%.
An age of unenlightenment.
Yeah. The 14% that showed up in the polls as supporting the secret social transition, we can probably think that half of that cohort, maybe a little less, are the actual people who are driving this. and then
Right.
the rest of them are useful idiots. Um,
Well, I got something to share about the 1 million march or whatever it's called. I don't know. Is that what it's called?
it's it's
Million March for Children
yeah, 1 million
is
for Children March or something like that.
Or I'm gonna
Um,
misnoun it a million times between now and then. But I got a small story to share if you got it, if you're willing to hear.
yeah, of course.
All right. So a friend of mine happens to be a super lesbian. Uh, Notified me that we were having a meeting locally, like super local, almost walking distance local. I'm like, all right, well, I'll be there. And I showed up early, just planning to sit in the back. Well, all of a sudden, I'm on the guest speakers list. And okay, it is what it is. And they admitted to me full off, like, we're just a small group. We're not quite sure what they're doing. And you know, when the meeting started, it was really apparent. What I liked about it is you could see their hearts, like their hearts were in the right place. And I liked that they made the floor open to everyone, even with all opinions, to talk about it. But the information that they gave, I don't know if I come from a Christian background, and it was like their version of if they wanted to bring Hell's Bells or Left Behind to the general public, you know, they're not going to hear what was that guy's name? Norman, who had the beautiful voice in Left Behind. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. In the private chat, I'll send you. Anyways,
okay.
it is a terrifying movie about how you're going to be left behind in the rapture. And it's like, that's kind of what it was like. They started off with all these like Kabbalic pedophile symbols. And my fear is that anyone who sees that, their walls are going to go up and that's just going to like immediately shut down.
Yeah, it's baby steps.
Right?
And I totally, my wife reminds me of this all the time, actually, because she's like, Shannon, you're too far for most people.
So
Like,
I left. I left the building. And I'm like, I don't. This is getting too heated. I felt my own defensiveness rising, thinking, and some of this is a little bit homophobic, but I know what they're meaning. I don't. I want the free speech. So I went out and I did security in the parking lot. Now all of a sudden we have a mob of protesters forming out at the gate, and so that's going on. And there was a trans woman who was speaking as well. Never met her before in my life. She comes out and says, well, I'm going to go talk to these goofs protesting out front. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go with you. I want to see where this goes. So I went along, and me and this trans woman and this other lady, I think she was a Christian woman from I didn't know, I can't remember any of their names. I think the trans woman's name was Danielle. But we show up and we start talking to these kids, and you know what? It actually went really well. Yeah, in the end, I ended up, me and the Christian woman ended up hugging one of the people there, and they recognized that we were caring about the kids. And I just thought, wow, I think we might have actually won some hearts and minds. The trans woman I was with she kind of got really frustrated with them and left. And so I was there with this woman, sort of talking with them alone. And yeah, like they're good kids and they're just standing up for what they believe in. So I ended saying that please continue to stand for what you believe in, but just try and keep your ears open to more facts. And I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with facts. So I just told them about my own gender nonconformity and my own fears and what I see. And I guess you can only speak from where you know, hey? And well, that was my favorite part of the night.
How old is that research on gender nonconformity and children? Because I know there's the research out that's like 80% of people with gender nonconformity will grow up to be gay adults, right? That there's that statistic going around.
Oh, I'm terrible. I'm terrible for bringing up research names and doctors and No.
Oh no, I was just wondering if you knew the decade. I know it's old. I just was
90s?
curious.
Yeah, 80s and 90s.
Okay.
And there were, to my knowledge, and I've seen different stats around this, but there were 11 different studies about gender nonconformity in children and persistence. And the studies came to different, obviously they assessed gender nonconformity in different ways, or gender dysphoria at young ages, and they had different sample groups, and then different ages which they drew the line. But it was something like 65 to 95%, depending on the study, desisted in their ideations as they went through puberty. So puberty, in the case of those young kids, was the natural cure, and kind of brain development. Like my understanding or the way I think about it is that kids, Scotty, maybe you relate to this. I know you've talked about your younger years a little bit here and there, and I think you've said that you would have been swept up into this. Um, but kids who are same sex attracted don't have language or the brain developed to understand what that means. They don't understand sexuality and sexual relations, right? They haven't been through puberty. They haven't been exposed to these things. So it's easy for a young mind to think, oh, well, I must be a girl because I like boys, or I must be a boy because I like girls. Um, and easy for kids to make that connection. So as they go through natural puberty, with the watchful waiting model, not affirmation. And this was, again, different in the different studies. Some of the studies were, don't pay attention to it, right? Just accept it. Just let it play out. Don't encourage it. Don't discourage it. Just be neutral on it. They call that watchful waiting. I believe at least one of the studies, they were more like, okay, no, take the opposite sex toys away and try and get the kids to. So there was some attempt to try and convince the kids to have interest in other things.
Encourage desistance. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of those kids, not all of them, grew up to realize that they were gay or lesbian. In my daughter's case, she's attracted to men, and has labeled herself, at least occasionally, as I check up on her online, as a gay trans mask, and in a relationship, or at least was, with a young man. So,
So her gender identity is the social justice trump card that defines the sexual nature of their relationship.
yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
That was one of the things that woke me up, was the stage of realizing that suddenly people were going around defining other people's sexual identity based on the gender identity of an individual. Like, somebody was explaining to me that if I got into a relationship with a man, the man would then be homosexual because of my gender identity. It would have nothing to do with the
Right.
biological realities of what was going on. So it was like, yeah, isn't that a bit of aren't I kind of stepping on that guy's rights? Like, what about his actual internalized sexual identity and understanding of himself, right? No, 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 no. That's transphobic even to think that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I got into big trouble here when the local Vichy gays took this woman and put her up on the stage saying that she was a gay man. And I spoke out about that, and oh man, yeah, I can't shop at certain shops in town now. They came at me good. I don't think they never came after my career at that point. That was when I stood up with Janaea, but they sure didn't like it.
Mm-hmm. So what's going on? Megan Murphy's coming to town.
I want to give an update on that, but I haven't been given the latest information. But yes, it's highly probable that Megan Murphy is coming to Nanaimo.
Okay.
But yeah, we're hoping to have the women who are organizing that come here and talk to us about that.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, these poor kids.
So will you be running for school council again?
A good question. It's a hell of a job
Yeah.
for next to no money. Um, they call it a part-time job. You get paid 14,000 bucks a year. It's more like a full-time
Ouch.
job.
Yeah.
And like when you're dealing with an electorate, it's shit for breakfast, shit for lunch, and shit for dinner. Right?
Mhm.
You're not going to make everybody happy. Part of the reason the school boards and municipalities cave to these activists is because they're so abusive, and people don't like
Yes.
to. They don't have the courage to set boundaries. Just say no. I don't think that that's what the electorate thinks. Um, what we are doing, however, so I've been helping. Like I called for the date for the Million for Children March. I was in a Zoom meeting with I don't know, a dozen people or so, and the Muslim dad who was calling for this million and had been for several weeks. And I said, well, you want it in September? That's 5 weeks away. Like you need a date, set a date. And so a couple of us pushed at him to get a date. He didn't want the U.S. date called Unteach the Overreach, where people in the states are organizing mass absence from schools. He didn't want September 22nd when Josh Alexander and Chris Elson, Billboard Chris, are going to be in Toronto. We settled on the 20th. We announced that, and we're connecting. I've been connecting with people across Canada over the last year and a half. Building networks and trust relationships and resources. And so I'm working behind the scenes to help connect more people. We've drafted a statement of principles, kind of a long form white paper that we've been sharing around with different groups, and it's gone through another revision. We want to have a short list of, like an executive summary that we can share with media about this date. And then I want to go back to, I want to go back to my life, to be honest. I've been doing this full time for 2 years. Um,
Right.
and so I have a career I've got to get to, but my next goal is to help to build community parents group here in Ottawa. And I know friends across the province and out of the BC are kind of thinking the same way. We've got 3 years before the next board elections. We need to support a grassroots movement. We need to give parents resources. We need to help them engage with the school board as it is now. We need to help to cultivate and develop some people who are going to be willing to run for school board, to support them in terms of efforts and door knocking and energy and money to get them elected.
Yeah. That's
It's
where
it's not a
we've
it's
had,
not a short process.
yeah, we've had one encouraging ruling out of BC, and that's the father with the daughter who was transitioned
Yeah,
um, in the school, and he now has the right to refer to his daughter as she, and I believe he's legally allowed to return home. And he was released from um, jail for his contempt on time served.
yeah. Well, they
Um,
also canceled his fine, right? He was supposed to pay a $30,000 or $40,000 fine, and the judge overturned the monetary punishment as well.
okay,
So
I hadn't heard that part of it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's a sign that things are going in the right direction. Another one was announced today. So I mentioned Josh Alexander, just for viewers who might not know who Josh is. He's from Renfrew, which is about, I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes west of Ottawa. And he was
Okay.
going to a Catholic school. And in a class discussion, um, he said that, God created man and woman. And he's a devout Christian young man, 17 years old, and that there's only two sexes. And he was sent to the principal's office. He repeated his statement that, biology, there's male and female. I believe that God created man and woman, and I'm sticking to that. And he was declared to be unsafe at school for other students. He was expelled. They
Right.
suspended him a couple of times. Um, and then he was expelled in January. And the court ruling came in today from the Superior Court of Ontario, and he's got a milestone victory now where they've declared, yes, you do have a case against the school, and they're going to hear the case. So
All right, Josh.
right, some good movement there. You know,
Mhm.
and
Was he the young student who also spoke up on the rights of girls to
yes,
not have the boys in the change rooms and stuff?
that's right. Yeah. And as far as, I mean, the witch hunts go, his dad was and mom are both teachers in Renfrew, not in that board.
Right.
They're in the public board. And
Okay.
his dad was suspended under investigation,
Wow.
guilt by association. And his mom got to school one day. She's a kindergarten teacher, and there was a big Pride Progress sticker on her door,
Wow.
which she took down
Right.
because she didn't put it there. And then she was suspended and investigated
Wow.
for transphobia. So like they went after the whole family.
Whole family.
Yeah, this is crazy, right? Like this is Franz Kafka, you know, the weaponization of bureaucracy. It's totalitarian. It's Eastern Bloc, Stasi. Your neighbors reporting on you. Your colleagues reporting on you. This is the state of affairs that we have around this issue in Canada.
Yeah,
And
it's coming out now that there's the rapes going on, right? Of the young boys who identify as being girls, like my gender identity is girl, and they've raped young girls in the change room. I'm not sure if that was in Canada or in the US, but that's here in North America. I know that part of the story.
yeah, a lot of them go unreported. There
Yes.
was a big scandal in the States last year where the administrators and the school board, I don't remember where that was, uh, just shuffled a student around, kind of like the Catholic priests who were abusing kids. We'll just move them to another parish, you know, somewhere where nobody knows them, and the problem might go away. And then it
Yeah,
came
and
out that it just happens again.
yeah, yeah, it's like the erections of Leah Thomas, right? It's come out that the young women in the post-secondary institution who were complaining, some of them had their scholarships threatened, others had their right to continue in university threatened, others were like, well, if you continue to complain, oh, it's that level of punishment where they were like in their last year, they were in their fourth year for towards their bachelor's degree, but if they continued to complain, they were going to strip them of their scholars, like of all they'd accomplished, so they wouldn't have even been able to transfer to a different university.
Yeah,
But finally, women have broken ranks, and it's coming out more and more just how inappropriate he was while he was in the women's change rooms.
yeah,
You know, this whole ideology just feeds into someone who it just really feeds into the whole predatory behavior because, okay, I was bringing the Catholic priest thing up with someone and I said, at least back then you could go to an ordination record and find this motherfucker. Like, oh, it's John Brown. No, not with these guys. It's like a sin. It is a hate crime to even find that dead name. So on your way to explore and find where's this person been, you're getting called a hater and a transphobe for even trying to do the discovery. What a wet dream for a pedophile. Sorry. No, I'm not.
yeah. Well, you had that in Nanaimo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Kelly,
immediately these people just think you're being transphobic, but a man is a man is a man. It's like they're so brainwashed. They would be surprised, I think, if they sat in a courtroom and saw like and that there was a really low percentage of biological females being brought up for sex-related crimes. I think they would honestly be surprised.
Kelly, where in
Anyway,
BC are you?
we're both in BC.
Yeah,
I'm in the Enderby area.
in the where?
Enderby,
Enderby.
Armstrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
and I'm over on the island.
Indeed.
Um, hey, I was wondering if you could tell our listeners where to go to if they want to find out when the 1 million March for Children.
Well, the best website to go to is blueprintforcanada.ca.
All right.
Blueprint for Canada is an organization that came together during last year's school board elections. And Peter Wallace, the founder of the organization, has been doing a really great job of building a website around identifying what the problems are with critical theory, critical race theory, queer theory, the whole decolonization narrative that's going on in Canada. And he's got lists of all the different organizations across the country that we've been able to, find out. And then the other one is Our Duty Canada. Our Duty is they're founded in Australia. They're a parent support group, and they're also an activist. Say activist. They're letter writers and researchers, and one of the women I'm working with at Our Duty Canada, Melanie Bennett, has done. She was just shy of her PhD before she turned a direction in her career. So she's got all the research methodologies, very rigorous and thorough. And Our Duty has put out briefings to Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick. They put a briefing to the UN. It was some kind of international call for submissions around these things, and Our Duty put together one of those submissions. So they're supporting parents, but also trying to engage with policy and parents and politics. Our Duty just produced a video that I've shared on Facebook and on Twitter. It's a minute and a half or 2 minutes about the 1 million for Children March, why people are marching, and then like the second half of the video is I'm an emotional guy, and there's sort of like flyover video from all these different cities in Canada, like the drone footage and that kind of stock footage, and in each of the cities they've got the flyover footage on is the sort of the event bill. Halifax, September 20th, 9 a.m. This location, march to the legislature. Fredericton, London, Vancouver, Nanaimo, like all the places. And there's even a march in Yellowknife.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and the word is actually that the organizer there has talked to some of the local police, and they said, "Oh, you want us to turn all the traffic lights green so when you're marching down the street, it's all like." So
that's an awesome experience.
Yeah. Now, our big recommendation for parents is if you've got kids, the best thing you can do on September 20th, keep them home.
Right.
Collaborate with other parents. Find some care if that's a challenge. Cooperate around that. Get the kids out of school. Our Duty has put up some letters that parents could send along with, as a note of absence. This is why. This is what we're concerned about, and we're making a statement.
Right.
And then for people who are going to be participating and more active, there's the locations and the people to contact. We're in the process of kind of finalizing provincial contact people right now for every province in Canada. So they're going to be sort of like the local people gathering information about events in the province, and then kind of communicating that up to our national level organization.
I got a question for you. Let's say you're someone listening here, and you want to volunteer, you want to get active a bit more, and maybe put up posters or something like that. Is there one poster that is available to use, or do they have to contact the individual organizers of each city?
So there are different organizations captaining events in different cities. So, we need people to take the lead in various places. And so everyone's kind of got their own graphics. They've got their own. So lots of people have their own websites about this. It's no one owns it. It's very distributed, which is good because it diffuses responsibility, it diffuses accountability to some extent. if someone's trying to pinpoint like who's organizing this, like, okay, maybe they'll come after me, maybe they'll come after Melanie, maybe they'll come after Camille or Peter, but like largely, this is a when September 20th was announced, it just sort of like with reverberated. People from all over are asking, okay, what can I do? What organizations can I get? How do I do something about this? And for people who don't have something happening near them, we're trying to coach them to collaborate with other parents and start something. Because the only way we're going to stop this is we're gonna stand up, we're going to speak the truth, and we got to, in some cases, go toe to toe with these activists, to say, like, you and your loudmouths don't get to run the show here. You're a minority. We all know you're a minority, and the rest of us don't. We're not going to go along. This is a real test of democracy.
Sure is.
There's that scary statistic. I'm trying to remember the researcher here in Canada who did it, but the younger the child, the higher the percentage of the school age group, like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever grade, that is identifying somewhere on what's called the trans spectrum.
Yeah.
And it was, what was his percentage? His percentage range was 10 to 30%. I think 20 was the average. So
yeah, it's really high.
That's a scary.
Yeah,
that's concerning.
Yes, and I've heard reports as high as 50% in some classrooms.
Yes.
And then the teachers saying, "Well, that's perfectly normal."
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
It's not a social contagion.
Well, what it is it's gender is one of the most complex heuristics that we teach to children, and really the internalization of that complex process is puberty. That's when it's like a visceral experience of, oh, this is what it is to be a girl. These are the ways in which I'm actually different from the boys around me. And they got stronger than me. So that was like a surprising part of being 16. So we're taking that and we're pathologizing a normal process. Because, yeah, to a 6-year-old, really, the difference between boy and girl is complex, right? Because there's not a lot of external things that differentiate boys and girls at 6 years old. So now we're taking what's a normal process of acquiring an understanding of the difference between boy and girl, man and woman, and we're pathologizing it, saying, oh, that's proof that you're really not a little girl. Oh, that's proof that you're really not a little boy. So, yeah.
You guys ever heard this rhyme? I learned it in grade 3. When God made little girls, he made them out of lace. He found he didn't quite have enough, so he left a little space. When God made little boys, he made them out of string. He found he had a bit too much, so he left a little thing.
No, I hadn't heard that. I was like the sugar and spice and everything nice.
That's what I knew about gender and the difference between boys and girls when I was 8.
I got these dogs here begging to be fed. I think I might have to take a moment here to feed them unless we're going to wrap up.
I'm feeling good at this point. Do you
All right.
have anything to add?
Just want to remind everyone it's the blueprint for Canada, right? And action for Canada.
Our Duty Canada.
See, I already messed it up. Our Duty Canada.
I don't want to take away from Action for Canada because they're doing incredible work. They're a Christian organization.
Okay.
They've got 100 chapters across the country. They have systems in place where their local chapters are engaging with school boards and municipalities. Gender is one of the issues that they're engaged with. They get a bad rap for being a Christian nationalist organization. But the organizer and kind of head of the group, Tanya Gaw, says, in the not the Charter of Rights, but the Bill of Rights, I think that was 1960 or 1961, identifies Canada as founded on not on Christian principles, but a nation under God. And her argument is that Judeo-Christian values are what we built our country on. And so that's from their Christian perspective that they promote Judeo-Christian values, and that's what they do. So Blueprint for Canada is a nonpartisan and what we call it, secular organization that's doing great work. And then Our Duty Canada, which is a parent support group that's also engaged in some politics.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for meeting today.
Really great to chat again. Kelly, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I've been following your work since I think you were on the first 1 or 2 episodes of the Gender Dysphoria Alliance podcast. And
oh wow,
I really appreciate the contribution that you're making and the honesty that you're sharing. It means a lot to parents, and it will mean a lot to kids someday, the work that you're doing. So thank you.
No, thanks. Yeah, I've started Detrans Alliance Canada. So far, it's just me and my occasional blog on it, but people are starting to follow it, and yeah, I'm hoping it'll take off.
Good. Well, great chatting with you both, and hope you have a super night. And it's 8 bells here in Ottawa, so it's Saturday. So I'm gonna go have a cocktail.
Okay, take care. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everybody.